Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 666. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about prairie lilies and pierogi, hiking and canoeing, pitcher plants, and bunny hugs as we go to Saskatchewan. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Saskatchewan. I'd like to welcome to the show Ashlyn George from thelostgirlsguide.com, who's come to talk to us about Saskatchewan. Ashlyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I've had this embarrassing hole in my map for Amateur Traveler for our coverage of Canada, which is Saskatchewan, and I've been asking around with who should I talk to, and I don't remember who told me, but someone said you have to talk to Ashlyn.
Yes, I am pretty passionate and proud to be born and raised here, and I also get the lucky job of sharing why it's a wonderful place to visit and explore.
Well, and not only that, I learned while we were doing the pre-call of this that Ashlyn is one of the bloggers emeritus for Saskatchewan. You used to be the Saskatchewanderer, which I love. That official program that has Saskatchewan having predominantly young bloggers who are paid to talk about the province. So we brought the right person on.
Well, I hope you did anyway. But no, genuinely, I'm very excited and passionate about traveling Saskatchewan, and I've been fortunate to travel a lot of the rest of the world, and I say you can have just as many wonderful experiences here at home for me as you can around the world, and I genuinely believe that.
Well, and as you can imagine, there were probably at least one or two people who said when I said I wanted to do a show on Saskatchewan, why it's just flat, there's nothing to see. Why are they wrong? Why should we go to Saskatchewan?
Well, first off, clearly they haven't visited for them to answer that way. And secondly, because the nature in Saskatchewan is amazing, and our connection to the land and that nature, whether through the boreal forest, which is half of the province, or through farming and agriculture and food production. So I think you get a really different experience in Saskatchewan than you would, say, in British Columbia or even on the East Coast. And they get some of that too because of their fishing industry in Atlantic Canada. But it's a pretty special place here.
Excellent. And what kind of itinerary would you recommend?
So the province is big, just like the rest of Canada.
It is big.
It is. And you could spend a whole day driving across it, particularly north to south, and then you'd
Yeah.
still only be halfway north in Saskatchewan. So what I would generally recommend for people is to tackle either the north or south. Pick one if you only have a week, because you
Okay.
don't want to spend all that time in a vehicle. I also highly recommend if you don't have a vehicle, if you aren't road tripping into the province, you're definitely going to want to rent one. It's
Mhm.
the most convenient way to get around and then feel like you had a great trip because you were able to get everywhere. So time, you do have to bring that into play just in terms of getting places, but it's worth it when you get there.
Okay. And we're going to make you pick north or south and then describe that itinerary. Which one are you going to pick?
I'm going to go north, and there's one very specific reason why I'm going to pick that, but then
Okay.
a lot of other reasons around it as well. Yeah, we'll go north for this itinerary.
Excellent. And we're starting where?
We'll start in Saskatoon. So there's two major cities in Saskatchewan. You have Regina in the south, it's our capital city, and Saskatoon to the north. It is the bigger city, and it's more easily accessible to get to the north, and you can fly in to Saskatoon as well. It's about just under 300,000 people.
Okay. And where are we going to go?
So for a whole week, you're definitely going to want to spend a day at the beginning and at the end in Saskatoon because there's lots to see and do here, especially around food. Again, agriculture, but we have some amazing chefs in the city as well. And I think I'd have to double check the stat to make sure it's still up to date today, but we do have the highest number of restaurants per capita in Canada. So we really, really love food. So the first and last day, you'll want to stick around Saskatoon, but then we're going to split the trip between heading about 2.5 hours north to Prince Albert National Park.
Okay.
But then we're also going to go further up north to La Ronge and Mississippi and do a little bit of canoeing and, fingers crossed, maybe even see the Northern Lights. That's one of my favorite things to see and experience in Saskatchewan is the Aurora Borealis.
Excellent. So you started us in Saskatoon. And so I have to ask, a person from Saskatchewan is called what, and a person from Saskatoon is called what?
So Saskatoon, some people refer to us as Saskatonians.
Okay.
And then Saskatchewan could be Saskatchewanians or
Okay.
yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. Or lots of people just refer to Saskatchewan as the 306. That's when you're calling into Saskatchewan, it's
Okay.
1306. And we do have another 3-digit code now, but we generally call it 306. So that would be local slang. Everybody would know what you're talking
Good to know. So what are we going to do in Saskatoon?
Saskatoon. So my passion is outdoor adventure. So any chance I can get outside, and I say this for both summer, which is amazing, but also for winter, you will still see me outside in minus 40-degree weather, and I will still be loving it.
I will be seeing you outside through the window, I should point out.
That's fair too. It's not for everybody. I always tell everyone it's not bad weather. It's just bad clothing and then kind of your perspective on it too, because there's so many fun things to do outside in the wintertime.
Well, and the good news is that I don't have to ask you whether you're talking about 40 below Fahrenheit or 40 below Celsius because they're the same temperature. So it's just darn cold.
Yeah, it's very, very chilly. But for the sake of this itinerary, we'll pick summertime because it's really lovely in Saskatchewan in the summertime. And our temperatures can get up to 30, 35 degrees Celsius. And we're also known as a major sunshine province. I think we get just under 3,000 hours of sunshine a year. And there's a little sunshine belt that runs through Canada, and Saskatchewan happens to get a lot of that. So even on those cold winter days, we still get the beautiful blue skies and sunshine. And I think that makes all the difference, especially when you compare it to something like the West Coast in Vancouver, where you get a lot of rain. But we'll stick for summer for this itinerary, and we'll start in Saskatoon. And I love to set the scene. We're a river city. We're also known as the Bridge City. There's quite a few bridges that zigzag across our river, and there's so much to do on and around the river. There's hiking, there's biking, Segway tours. I really love to recommend paddling to people because you're so used to seeing a perspective from the riverbanks. And when you get out on the water and you look back at the city, it's a really cool perspective. And there's a boat called the Prairie Lily. So if you aren't much of a paddler, you can it's about an hour-long boat tour ride that you can take. And rain or shine, they do have a cover. I was actually on it a week and a half ago and it was raining, but it was still an amazing experience.
Well, and then you're assuming that we know some things about Saskatoon that I think a lot of us don't know. Saskatoon is on a river. And what river is that?
It's the South Saskatchewan River.
Okay. Well, that seems like a good place to put it. Okay.
Yes.
And then you talked about getting out there with paddling. For instance, is there an outfitter that if we are not flying with our own kayak or canoe, is there an outfitter there that you recommend?
Absolutely. There's a couple different ones. So you can actually take a guided tour too, depending on your level of comfortability in the water. But Escape Sports offers guided paddleboard tours and rentals. And then there's Ebb's Source for Adventure. They also do canoes and kayaks. So you can basically take your pick for what type of watercraft you want to be on the water for.
Excellent. We'll put links to those in the show notes. And then you had us on a boat.
Yeah. So if you don't like paddling, there's also a boat called the Prairie Lily, which is the province's flower. But you can ride the Prairie Lily and you get a lot of history about Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, and the riverbank and how the city came to be. And it's about an hour long and you get to go under a couple of the bridges and you turn around and come back. So there's different options for different levels of adventure.
And
for
this
those who
boat
want to experience
is a paddle wheeler, it looks like.
It is, yeah.
Excellent. Where to next?
So once you've got the lay of the land by walking or paddling the river valley, you'll notice we have the downtown core, and this is where a lot goes on in the city. There's downtown, Broadway, and Riversdale are three main neighborhoods where you'll always find something going on, and you'll find a lot of restaurants in those three areas as well. And they all hug and curve around the riverbank too, so you're never too far away from the river, which is great. So I would recommend, if you love coffee, stopping in a few different coffee shops. One of my favorites is Drift Cafe and Vista Lounge. So if you want to go for an afternoon beer, they have a rooftop patio that you can enjoy it on. Or if you want to chill out and have a coffee, they actually have hammocks inside and lots of greenery and plants. So you can chill out in a hammock and look out the window and watch everybody going by. They're right across from the farmers market too. So when the farmers market is on, there's lots going on in the Riversdale area. If you're looking for food in the Riversdale area, the Odd Couple is always one of my favorites to go to. It's like an Asian fusion blend, and they partner with, there's 9 Mile Brewery across the street, and they partner with them and have their beer in there. And it's a really great place for lunch and supper. I recommend it for both. But if you're looking for brunch locations, Hometown Diner, literally just a couple doors down, they do brunch really, really well.
Okay. And are they going to have a traditional Saskatoon spread? And is there anything remarkable about a traditional Saskatoon spread? Or
so in terms of food, I say we have a lot of Ukrainian influence in Saskatchewan. Okay. Yeah, there's actually a region, and it's the region I grew up in. People joke about it that it's the pierogi belt.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of Ukrainian descendants there. So you will find the pierogies and sausage, but I would say our most iconic claim to fame is the Saskatoon berry. And so it grows in taller shrubs and bushes, and you pick them in the summertime, and they're like a blueberry. They're more purplish than blue though, and similar flavor to blueberry. And you'll find them in jams and jellies and pies and Saskatoon ice cream, Saskatoon liqueur. We put them in pretty much everything that tastes wonderful.
Okay. Well, you had me at pie, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say if you're coming into Saskatoon, definitely check out anything with the Saskatoon berry in it. You won't be disappointed.
And that's going to tend to be more of a fall offering?
It's actually year round, especially when you get into the preserves.
Sure.
The berry, actually, you can eat it about mid-July is when it's fully ripe and able to pick it.
Excellent. Where to next?
One of the biggest things Saskatoon is known for recently, and actually we got a shout out in the New York Times about it, and we actually had the New York Times travel writer Jada Ewan from last year. She stopped in Saskatoon, the Ramey Modern Art Gallery. It was a huge project and gallery to bring into Saskatoon, and some really great community support for it as well. And it is a beautiful architectural structure, again, along a riverbank. And you would be remiss if you didn't stop in there for a visit to check it out. Even just the views from the second floor. And they have Shift Restaurant in there too if you want to grab a bite. And their galleries are always changing, lots of local artists. They have some Picasso lino cuts in the gallery as well. So not just local, but international and historic pieces too. So definitely worth an afternoon spent browsing through the Ramey Modern.
Excellent.
And then if you love shopping, we do have lots of boutique shops. You'll find quite a few different Saskatchewan stores too. So if you want to stop in and get things that are specifically made and produced in Saskatchewan, again, I'm always going to come back to food. Today, it's always going to come back to that. We have a lot of growers and producers and farmers and people who are really passionate about the products they create. So there are a few different places that you can shop for local stuff in Saskatoon, but the Sask Made Marketplace is a great one-stop shop if you want to take things home for family and friends. And it's a little outside of the downtown area. It's on one of our other major strips called 8th Street, but there are lots of shops in another neighborhood area called Broadway. There's a bunch of different stores that you can pick up some Saskatchewan goods there as well. And again, it's one of those beautiful streets that there's festivals there throughout the summertime. Sometimes they close it down completely, and you can wander around, check out all the different artists that have their products sitting out on the street. And it's a wonderful time. The Fringe Festival is a fantastic time to be exploring in the Broadway area.
Well, and you bring up festivals, so tell us a little more about the Fringe Festival or other festivals that we might want to target for our trip.
Our biggest festival, I would say, in the summer is the Jazz Festival.
Okay.
And you know it's summer when the Jazz Festival is on. So it's usually the last 2 weeks in June and ends around Canada Day. So it just finished now. And although it's called the Jazz Festival, they do bring in a variety of different artists. So this year they had The Roots and Jan Arden. They had Corb Lund. They had Walk Off the Earth. And then they have venues all around the city as well where you get more local artists playing and performing too. So it's not just on a main stage, it's throughout the city, and there's shows every night. There's a free stage and then the main stage, which are the pay for tickets. And the city revolves around it for those 2 weeks in the summertime. And that's when you know summer and warmth and sunshine have arrived in Saskatchewan.
Well, and for our listeners who are not Canadian, let's put Canada Day on the calendar. That's July 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
So Canada Day celebrations are always big in the city. There's usually a fireworks show in the evenings around 10 p.m. and throughout the day, there's lots of different activities going on too. So it's a great way to celebrate being Canadian and being proud of where we're from.
Excellent. If there's one place I should be on Canada Day in Saskatoon, where would it be?
So in Saskatoon, most of the activities happen in Diefenbaker Park, again, another park along the river. And they always have musical artists and bands and food. And it's great for families. There's lots of kids activities. And it's a wonderful big green space where you can bring a blanket and a picnic basket and enjoy spending the day with family and friends.
Excellent. Any other festivals we want to talk about before we get back to, you were talking about other things?
Yeah, so we have the Fringe Festival as well, and that's a little later in the summer. That's usually the beginning of August, and it's celebrating art in Saskatoon. So again, it's in that Broadway district and neighborhood. Okay. They have lots of plays in different venues around the area. There's a couple schools in the area that have theaters, so there's a few different theatrical shows. You have street performers, you have local artists who come out and sell their jewelry, their painting, a variety of different things. And again, it's another excuse to get outside in the summer months and hang out outdoors with your family and friends.
Well, and you get a fair amount of sunlight in the summertime. So we're recording this on July 4th. What time is the sun going down these days?
I looked it up just the other day, and I think it was 9:53 p.m. that the sun was setting.
Okay.
It stays light late, and that's one of the best things in the summertime too. It's wonderful.
Excellent. Where else do we want to see in Saskatoon before we head out?
So because you're in Saskatoon in the summertime, and one of our favorite things to do when in the city is to sit on a patio and have a nice beer or wine or whatever your drink of choice is. But Saskatoon actually has a lot of breweries and microbreweries that have just come in the last decade or so. Some of our legislation has changed. So now there's a little more freedom and flexibility on who can.
Yep. We're seeing that a lot of places. Yeah.
Totally. And we also have a couple micro distilleries in Saskatoon as well. One is called Stumbletown. There's Black Fox Farm and Distillery. They're south of Saskatoon. It's about a 5-minute drive, and they've really diversified. So they have some amazing gin. They're award winning, but they're actually also a flower farm. So you can go out in the middle of summer and you can walk through the rows of flowers, and you can pick flowers and take home a bouquet. And then they also grow pumpkins. So in the autumn, you can go back and go pick pumpkins to take home to carve for Halloween. And they actually do this really great charity event where they take the biggest pumpkins that they've grown and they'll drop them from up high from like a crane. And it's called a pumpkin smash. They raise money for charity doing that. And it's quite fantastic to come out and see it. And they have a beautiful piece of land just south of Saskatoon. But yeah, we have a new distillery called Stumbletown in the city. And then we have LB Distillers as well. And they like to joke that they're president of good times. And the guy behind it all, Michael Goldney, he actually won $15 million and quit his day job as a physician and co-founded this micro distillery. And so LB Distillers originally stood for Lucky Bastard Distillers, but they did have a few naming issues around that. So to keep it PG, they go by LB Distillers these days. And so their passion is actually whiskey, but they have a really good vodka and lots of flavored vodkas as well. So if you want to sit on a patio and have some really good drinks, this is the place to do it. And I am a beer fan.
There we go. You're going to give me a brewery, I hope.
Yes. So I am a big beer fan, and we have breweries all around Saskatchewan, and you can get most of them in Saskatoon as well. But one of my favorites is 9 Mile. They're in the Riversdale district across from the Odd Couple. Yeah, we just make really good beer here. This is beer country, right? We're growing it all
Right.
here in Saskatchewan. So it's literally coming from farms all around straight into the city and being brewed up. So fresh as it gets here.
Excellent. Anything else on Saskatoon before we head out of town?
I think for now that'll keep you busy for the 2 days that you'll spend before you leave and when you come back in. Yeah.
And you have us heading up to a national park.
Yes. So if you head to about 2.5 hours north of Saskatoon, you'll come to Prince Albert National Park. And it's a 4-season park. And this is one of my favorite places to go in Saskatchewan because there's always something new or different and exciting every time I go there. I never have the same experience twice. And if you're really looking to see wildlife, this is your best bet. So if people are familiar with Banff in Alberta and the resident elk that live in Banff, that's exactly what we have in Prince Albert National Park. The town site is called Waskesiu, and it is not uncommon to be walking down the street and look over and there's a herd of elk sitting in a backyard or front yard or hanging around the cabins. So you get to see a lot of wildlife in the park. In the springtime, you'll often see bears that have come out of hibernation. I did short little, it's called the Mud Creek Trail. It's just a couple kilometers. There's a boardwalk, so it's super family friendly. You could even kind of walk your bike along it, or you can bring your kids with you. And in the springtime, I actually saw 5 bears, a mom and 3 cubs, and then 2 other solo bears within maybe 10 minutes of each other while hiking the trail. So you really get a good opportunity to see wildlife. And I've also seen wolves in the park. You see them more in wintertime when it's a little bit quieter in the park. But I was actually hiking one of the most iconic trails in Prince Albert National Park is the Grey Owl Trek to Grey Owl's cabin. And it's a 42-kilometer round trip hike. You could paddle it across Kingsmere Lake as well, but lots of people do the hike. And I was coming out on the beach section at the end of doing this hike, and there was a wolf standing on the beach. And I looked at the wolf, and the wolf looked at me, and he turned around and he walked back into the trees. And then as I was hiking back along the trail, I came upon his footprints. It had actually recently snowed, so you could clearly see his footprints, and it was amazing to see how large they were. Lots of really wonderful wildlife experiences in Prince Albert National Park.
And the 43-kilometer hike is a how many day hike, roughly?
So some people actually trail run it, and they'll do it in one day. Yeah, I have a friend who
Wow.
that's what he does every year. He goes up to hike gray owls, and sometimes he does it in a day, sometimes he bikes it, sometimes he does it overnight. I would recommend spending one night camping on the trail. There's 4 campsites at different
Okay.
locations along the trail, and they're also used by people who are paddling in too. So you could kayak it, but most people canoe it. You do have to portage into it, but it's set up really well for portage, so you can pull your canoe across and get it into the lake. Probably one of the most iconic hikes in Saskatchewan, and it's really beautiful. You're hiking through the boreal forest, you're right along the riverbank, and actually one of the most beautiful Northern Lights shows I've ever seen was when I was hiking that trail. It was early May a couple years ago, and it was about 10 p.m. at night, and we were thinking about going to bed, and I was like, let's walk out to the lake and just see what's happening in the sky. And the Northern Lights were so brilliant. They were coming straight down overhead. So oftentimes the Northern Lights, if you've never seen them, they arc across the northern part of the sky. But if it's a really intense show, you'll see a variety of different colors. So green is the most common to be seen, but sometimes you'll see white and purple, and sometimes red as well, but we don't see as much red down here in, I guess, more southern Saskatchewan. And we pulled out our sleeping bags. There's a little sandy beach that curves along the lake. We put our sleeping bags on that beach and we laid there till about 3:30 in the morning. That was about when the sun was starting to glow in the horizon too. And we watched the Northern Lights shoot down on us all night. It was pretty magical. You can't make this stuff up. Saskatchewan is incredible for nature.
I have not been fortunate with Northern Lights. I think I have been places where they have been out, but then the weather did not permit me to see them. So still on the bucket list. So
well, you got to come visit Saskatchewan then.
Apparently so. Apparently so. Anything else we want to do in the national park while we're there?
Yes, so there's quite a few different things. The fishing is pretty good. In Saskatchewan is known for fishing. We have some world record fish coming out of the lakes in Saskatchewan.
And what would I fish for there?
Oh my goodness. Northern pike is probably what most people end up getting, but you can get big monsters. Like I myself have caught, it was about a 25-pound, 46-inch northern pike. And for reference, I'm about 5'4", which is about 65 inches tall. And this fish was about 45 inches long. So it was almost as long as I am tall. You won't get that in Prince Albert National Park. You'll get that further north, but on this road trip, you'll be heading up further north. So you might actually be able to get one there. But lots of walleye, perch. Really, we have pretty much any fish you could want in terms of Canadian species in Saskatchewan. It's pretty amazing.
I remember my father catching a northern pike one time when we were probably somewhere up in northern U.S. And not only were the fish biting, but the fish were biting. He got bit by a northern pike because they will give you a fight.
They will. Sometimes they'll be super chill. The big fish I caught, he lumbered up to the surface of the water. And then sometimes you really got to watch your fishing line because they'll snap it right off. And then you get the typical stories of, oh, it was this big. This is got away on me.
Interesting.
But yeah, everybody loves to catch walleye here. It's also known as pickerel. And that's actually also the provincial fish of Saskatchewan too. And it does like deeper waters, but you can find it through a bunch of different lakes in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And then one other little thing I love to share with people about Prince Albert National Park, because for me, I was traveling in Borneo and was excited to see this plant, and then came home and discovered that not only do we have it in Saskatchewan, but it does grow across Canada. But there's a trail called the Boundary Bog Trail. And have you ever heard of pitcher plants?
No.
So they're really cool. They are a carnivorous plant. So in Prince Albert National Park on the Boundary Bog Trail, you can find pitcher plants. Mm-hmm. And so they're shaped to kind of look like a pitcher that you would drink maybe lemonade out of, but they catch water and have a cavity with digestive liquid in it. And then they trap different bugs that they then consume. So they're carnivorous plants, and they live in boggy areas in Canada, and you can walk along the boardwalk on the Boundary Bog Trail and see some of these pitcher plants, which I think is super cool. I love outdoors and nature, and I'm actually a biology teacher by trade, so these are some of my favorite things to share with people.
Excellent. They seem to me to be a tropical plant, so I am surprised that this is something you'd find in Saskatchewan.
Totally. And they're found in boggy areas. There's actually another provincial park that you can find them in Saskatchewan. And then you can also find them out in Atlantic Canada and Newfoundland as well.
And you say you found them on the bog trail.
The Boundary Bog
The
Trail.
Boundary
Yeah.
Bog Trail. Okay. That sounds like something I'm going to need really good boots for. Galoshes, or what is the Boundary Bog Trail?
Pretty great hike in the park. It's not too long. It's about a 2-kilometer loop, and they have built up a boardwalk over the boggy areas.
Okay.
You'll either be on a boardwalk or you'll just be in the trees where it is a better trail. So you don't have to worry about having rubber boots or anything like that. If you just have shoes or hikers, you'll be good and all set on the trail. But it's beautiful. And in the autumn time, they have lots of tamarack trees as well, and the golden larch that turn yellow in the autumn too. So yeah, it's great to hike in any season.
You have said you were an all-season traveler in Saskatchewan. Do you have a favorite season?
Winter is my new thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. I spent quite a few winters away when I was traveling. It was easier for me to travel throughout the winter months and come home and work in the summertime. I had a seasonal summer job. And now that I've been back for a couple years and spending more time in winter, I am delighted by the number of outdoor activities that you can do. And actually, in Prince Albert National Park, a girlfriend and I went up to the park, and it was probably early April, and we built a quinzee. So I'm not sure, are you familiar with what a quinzee is?
I am not familiar with a quinzee.
It's not an igloo, but it has a similar structured shape to it.
Okay.
And what you do to build a quinzee is you take a couple shovels and you shovel all of the snow out of an area onto the sides. And then as soon as you finish that, you turn around and you shovel all that snow back into the pile that you just pulled it out of. And you pile it up into a mound, usually 4 to 6 feet high. Again, it depends how many people you want to sleep inside the quinzee at night. But you pile it up high enough that you can actually hollow it out. So you let it settle for 4 or 5 hours, and then you hollow it out and you build a little entry doorway to it.
Okay.
And the way the snow compacts, it's a really sound structure that you can actually sleep inside for the night. And you can sleep outside in the snow in the middle of winter in quite cold temperatures inside a quinzee and stay fairly warm. Of course, you need an insulated sleeping bag and a sleeping mat to keep you up off of the snow. To build a quinzee is an amazing experience, and sleep in it in the snow in the middle of winter in Saskatchewan. It's not for everybody, but it's a really fun experience to have. And I feel like it's one of those iconic experiences that if you grew up particularly in smaller towns, you probably built a quinzee in your gym class and stayed out overnight, or so that's what we did in my grade 10 classes. In the back of our school, we built quinzees, and you didn't have to sleep overnight in it, but if you wanted to, you could. And I think everybody did sleep overnight in the quinzee. It's a lot of fun.
Now, is that also in some ways not just fun for the kids, but also a survival thing, that if you get stuck out in the snow, build yourself a quinzee and survive? Or is that why it's taught in school?
You definitely could. It would take you a while to build it, so it might not be the most efficient structure to build just in terms of time. It's absolutely a shelter that you could use. Prince Albert National Park is a great park to do this in, and lots of school groups do come up in the wintertime. They do have winter camping sites, and because they're a national park, they've cut the wood for you, so you don't have to worry about going and getting your own wood. So it makes it a little easier for the bonfire that you have at night. And I like to joke too that camping in winter is just as wonderful because you still have all the same great things, the s'mores, the campfire, the good food. And the best part is in the wintertime, you don't have mosquitoes.
Okay, which implies that I will see them in the summertime.
Yes, in the summertime, you do need to be prepared for bugs. So I highly recommend bringing bug spray or cream, or you can purchase little coils that you can set up if you're sitting around a campfire, sitting outside with people. You can light them up, and it usually keeps the bugs at bay. And they can be from barely seeing any mosquitoes to they can get pretty horrible, depending just on how wet the year is, really.
Okay. And there's no particular month that I need to avoid because it's Black Fly month or something like that?
When you do head north, definitely you get seasons for different types of bugs. So I was just recently on a 5-day fly-in canoe trip in northern Saskatchewan, and we lucked out and we didn't have a lot of bugs, but we were also there late May, early June. And I know just this past weekend, I had a friend up north and she was saying that the mosquitoes were definitely out, but she didn't say that they weren't unmanageable. She just had a mosquito net on and made sure to use bug spray and it was fine.
Okay. And when you say fly up further north, so you're still not north from Saskatchewan in terms of that is a big place and the roads don't go all the way up.
Some roads do go up.
Yeah.
Yes. So highways don't go all the way north
That's
in Saskatchewan.
What I meant. Yep. Okay.
We have a lot of grid roads or gravel roads in Saskatchewan, even just in our southern area with all the farmland too. A lot of it is gravel roads. But the furthest north you can get on paved highway is about 4 hours north of Saskatoon. It's a community called La Ronge.
Which is where we're heading next?
This is where we're heading next. And
Okay.
This is true outdoor adventure. So you can head up to La Ronge, and it's the last major town before the wilderness really takes over.
And when you say major town?
Well, I believe La Ronge probably has around 2,000 residents living there.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a pretty small area, but it's the last place you can get most services you might need. They have everything there. And then an hour further north of La Ronge is a tiny community called Missinippi. And this is a great base for taking off for that really backcountry northern experience in Saskatchewan. So I mentioned fishing earlier. This is where you would head up to if you were doing a fly-in fishing resort or experience.
Got it.
And this is also, Saskatchewan is well known for whitewater canoeing. So a lot of people don't think of whitewater when they think of Saskatchewan. And they even have a whitewater festival over the July long weekend, and they sell 120 tickets to it. It usually sells out. And it's a wonderful weekend where people get to head north and they canoe or kayak. People bring out paddle boards. Sometimes people even bring out a surfboard. And there's lots of rapids that you get to play in, and you get to do it safely too, because there is a danger and a risk with canoeing rivers with rapids. So you do have to be careful. If you don't have experience, I highly recommend going with a guide, a specific guide, Churchill River Canoe Outfitters. Rick from CRCO is amazing. He will give you all the information you need. He will set you up with a guide, with gear, with everything you can need. And you can basically choose your own adventure. If you want to do it, he can make it happen for you.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
And is there anything else we're doing up here? This is a place to go for canoeing, fishing,
swimming, experiencing that northern Saskatchewan boreal forest nature setting. It's a great place to disconnect, whether you want to or not, because if you head north of Missinippi, you don't actually have cell service. So it's a great place to disconnect and reconnect.
And this is where the highway ends, and we've just barely crossed over into northern Saskatchewan.
Yes. So technically you could call like Ronge and Missinippi almost central Saskatchewan.
Right.
But for the rest of us who live in southern Saskatchewan, we call it the north.
Right.
And then there is a grid road that goes all the way up to Stony Rapids. And then again, you can catch float planes out of Stony Rapids to head further north. There's actually a community in the very north of Saskatchewan near the border. It's called Uranium City. And there obviously used to be a uranium mine there, but it's since closed down. And so very few people actually live in Uranium City anymore. But it's located on the shores of Lake Athabasca. And there is some incredible fishing at Lake Athabasca. And this is actually... There are the Athabasca sand dunes, and that is still on my bucket list of places I need to get in Saskatchewan to go experience the sand dunes. And so the Athabasca sand dunes are the most northerly sand dunes in the world. They're right here in Saskatchewan, and they are active. So they're ever changing and moving and shifting as well. And there's lots of endemic species and plant species up there as well. So it's definitely high on my list of somewhere I'd like to get to.
Excellent. Well, and just for some scope in terms of how big a place Canada is, so we just barely got into northern Saskatchewan. You talked about the Athabasca sand dunes, which are way up there in the north, and then we're only halfway up the country still. So lots of
all
Canada
the territories. Yes, it's such a huge country.
Excellent. Anything else we want to talk about in terms of itinerary before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
I think with Saskatchewan, being prepared for those longer drives, but then also
Hmm.
being prepared to take the time to stop on the way. So I mentioned the main destinations that we were heading to, but there's lots of little places you might want to consider stopping off, or there's provincial and regional parks. And actually, some of those smaller parks or lesser known parks, although I mentioned the national one, they're just as wonderful to visit too. So being open to chatting with the locals and finding out what you can see and do in the area. And so I find my trick when I travel in Saskatchewan is to stop in, find Coffee Row, or stop in at the local coffee shop or grocery store and say, hey, what's going on here? What's there to check out? And people are so passionate about sharing that information, and they're so excited that you're in their community and you're curious about it, that you could probably spend all afternoon chatting with people. So being open to not just focused on the itinerary, but saying, hey, what other experiences and adventures can we have along the way?
Excellent. Some wrap-up questions. You're standing in the prettiest spot in Saskatchewan. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
So you're standing in southern Saskatchewan, and you're standing in the Cypress Hills region. So it's actually one of the highest areas in Canada east of the Rocky Mountains. It ranges, whether you're in the Alberta or Saskatchewan side, from I think it's 1,372 meters above sea level. And we have this joke in Saskatchewan that we're so flat, because there are flat areas, but we're so flat that you can watch your dog run away for 7 days. And yeah, so I joke about it, and I think it's funny, and there are flat areas, but there are rolling hills. And no, we don't have mountains, but we do have amazing viewpoints too. And so I encourage people to find those locations, and Cypress Hills is one of them. And so you can stand there at 1,400 meters above sea level, and you get to see the vista in front of you. And we have amazing skies. We're called the land of living skies. The sunsets here are absolutely incredible because you get to see so much of that space. And so to be standing there with that view, it puts you and life and the country and the province into perspective, and thinking about how fortunate we are to have access to the nature that we do in Saskatchewan.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Saskatchewan.
Okay, so Saskatchewan, we have some interesting terminology for some clothing items, and two jump into my mind. So men's underwear, what do you refer to men's underwear as?
Underwear?
Yeah. So in Saskatchewan, you might call them gitch or gotch.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just a quirky one. And then pullover sweater with a hood,
Okay.
we actually call it a bunny hug. Most people call it a hoodie.
A hoodie, yeah.
But yeah, we call it a bunny hug.
All right.
A little bit quirky. That's Saskatchewan.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Ashlyn George from the lostgirlsguide.com. And Ashlyn, if we wanted to send people to your best post on Saskatchewan, where are we going to send them?
I actually have a post. It's a collaboration from a variety of different photographers around Saskatchewan, and I had them submit some of their favorite Northern Lights photos from around the province.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Okay.
Beautiful destinations and amazing skies, and these photos are incredible. So I highly recommend that post.
Excellent. Ashlyn, thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Saskatchewan.
Well, thank you so much.
I got an email a while back from Jack who said about the episode we did on Serbia. Hi, Chris. Heartily enjoyed your latest podcast on Serbia. My wife and I were there last year. Your hosts forgot to mention this fabulous museum, a must-see if you're going to Belgrade. Thought you and your listeners should know. Keep up the good work, and it's the Nicholas Tesla Museum. And thanks, Jack. That sounds like something I would enjoy. And actually, it sounds like something our guests would enjoy too. So I think they may have missed it or just forgotten about it. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. Join the mailing list where we put out all sorts of interesting announcements and even some deals. And thanks so much for listening.